Our society is at a crossroads. We're at each other's throats. We don't know who we can trust. Times, they are a-changin', just like the song says. Or are they changing? From what we've already learned this season, this really isn't much different than any other time in history. America, as she always has been, is divided. What do we do about it? How do we rectify it? Like, how do we come back from this? In this series, Overthinking Everything, I like taking an in-depth look at various topics and filtering them through the madness that is my noggin. And as I hashed out topics for this first season, I started to see a trend with what I was really talking about, an overarching theme, if you will, deconstructing a culture of cultism. When I first started mapping out all of this show, I'd considered overcoming the culture of cultism. But I realized I've got a long way to go before I consider myself healed from the traumas of my raisings. Instead, as I began my journey as a content creator on social media, I was opened up to the term deconstructing. Many use this term in reference to their religion or spiritual upbringing, since many of us were brought into a faith non-consensually. Deconstruction, as I mentioned in episode 1, is sort of a Cartesian rethinking and reconsidering of all your previous ideas about what is and isn't. It's pulling the string on the sweater and the whole thing unraveling. What I found was that I wasn't only deconstructing my faith and spirituality, as I'd really been doing my entire life, but I was also deconstructing everything I knew about history, patriotism, work ethic, loyalty, how I was raised and who hurt me, and every principle that I hold dear. In future episodes, I'll chronicle more my personal journey through things like religion, politics, business, and even mental health. In this series about us, I build on those ideas to ask the big questions. Who are we? Why are we who we are? Why do we do the things we do and act the way we act? I'm going to share some stories and experiences that relate to my point. We're going to hopefully open some doors in our minds and look at things a different way, maybe than we have been trained to. I will dissect this sect of our society that is flocking toward divisive cultism, and hopefully explain how it's possible that some people fall prey to this sort of narcissistic gaslighting. I want to talk about the hard lines we draw in our proverbial sand that we absolutely won't budge from. How ridiculous it is that we behave in such ways over anything when we begin and end each and every day with hypocrisy. I want to talk about the compromises each and every one of us make each and every single day. Compromises that result in this constant wager that could have eternal consequences. I want to talk about selling our souls. And welcome to the podcast. I know, that's a heavy conversation, soul selling and all. I'm not here to preach, except to say that this series is a lot of things. But it is both political and religion. You know, politics, religion, political, religious. So just go ahead and click next if you're easily triggered. Still with me? Impressive. First off, I shouldn't be the person to judge anyone. All right, I am a walking piece of garbage as a human being, a real dumpster fire, okay? And I try every day. I work very hard every day to be a better man, to be a better human. Some days are better than others. Suffice to say, that when I speak about things like morality and character, integrity and ethics, that sort of stuff, believe me, I am not on some sort of self-righteous, high horse, holier-than-thou pedestal screaming down. I'm shouting up from the bottom saying, hey, you're getting too close! This isn't intended to be a judgy conversation. I'm taking myself down as much as anyone else here. It's simply philosophy, and I'd like for you to approach this with an open and pragmatic mind. It's essential that we do this. As I said, it is political and religious, but it is so much more. This is academic and sociocultural. This is certainly economic. This problem in America right now. I'm going to get personal, maybe even private. Some of what I talk about in this series will be my journey, and hopefully it's relatable enough to enjoy as a story. My own sort of Aesop's fables. They all have a moral if you pay close enough attention. This series of Overthinking Everything is about overthinking ourselves, us, society, how we're losing our soul, and maybe how we can get our soul back, if that's even possible after one has sold it. This, it seems, has been my life's work, this quest for understanding myself and the world around me, especially the people around me. Like you, I've witnessed and participated in actively the degradation of our social fiber, the bickering and vitriol, the back and forth. Most of that has been a social experiment for me for years, leading up to this, observing how people act and react and how some respond to certain language. I've enjoyed similar communicating styles and language as some of those people, but I've directed it toward them, not the minorities they've chosen. What I've found is that they discern the bigotry and bias when it affects them, but are absolutely tone deaf to it when it comes out of their own mouths against others. I'll be sharing more of these observations as well as observations about those around me. I don't discount that anger is justified in America today, on all sides. I'm going to discuss why this segment of our society has fallen prey to the cult of political personality. But I'm also going to make the claim that it isn't an excuse for their behaviors. We should in no way tolerate it on any level anymore. We need to stand up to it and end it in its tracks. I've been an advocate for a certain level of societal division, suggesting we draw hard lines regarding things like narcissism, toxicity, white supremacy, religious zealotism, encouraging ostracization, in fact, to keep that cancer from spreading. And while I stand by that, I also recognize that while distancing from cancerous social toxicity is essential, it's pointless if we don't study it and seek to understand it from afar. You see, this is a cancer that affects each and every one of us, American, or if you're watching this in another country. This fervent, almost psychopathic loyalty to not just conspiracy theories and falsehoods, lies, but being right, going to any means to justify your opinion or someone else's. And we can laugh at how stupid they are to fall for it, sure. Enjoy that. I do. But there really is a sadness and a darkness to it. So all the jokes and punchlines aside, God knows I make them. It's time to step back and look at not only how this cancer began and spread, but also how this rift in our culture affects us and how we are all contributing to it, whether we know it or not. In the next few episodes, I'm going to seek to solve the human mathematical equation, a term you'll hear further explained later this season. What does that mean? I want to solve for X. I want the missing information about us. I want to know why we do what we do, why we believe the things we believe and fall into these cult-like obsessions with someone else's beliefs and ideas, and then use those beliefs to wager our eternal souls. I want to know, are some people just really terrible human beings who lack any sense of morality, ethics, character, integrity? Or is there a much bigger reason that makes people sacrifice their core human values just to get their way? I am not the person to make the ultimate judgment on someone's soul, thankfully. But I believe that the little compromises we make every day are a constant wager for our souls. We're gambling with our opinions and our attitudes, aren't we? Like, if we're wrong, we're falling on a sword for what then? I'm presenting my hypothesis that we believe in everything we believe in for a psychologically traumatic reason. That every single action and reaction we perform is deeply rooted in some form of psychological trauma. And just like you, I have my traumas, and they've shaped me and my views. So if I say something that ticks a nerve, just know it's ticked mine first. I'm interested in the compromises we all make each and every day. Those compromises against what one would think would be our core values, just as human beings. But when we're faced with a moral dilemma that challenges our beliefs or our wants, we, but, until we justify our position. Like children in cages. You just try to get someone to answer how they feel about the words children in cages. Nothing else, just children in cages. And for some, this is a hot button political trigger tied to the issue of illegal immigration. But I'm asking about the initial emotional response to the visual one gets when I say the words children in cages. We reduce that atrocity down to a political platitude. Why? It makes it easier, that horror, it makes it easier to swallow. You see, if we saw it for what it was and admitted to ourselves what it was, and then we just get to be mad and have a frothing at the mouth party with our frothing at the mouth friends, and nobody has to acknowledge that these people are humans, except maybe the occasional Sunday when you have a guest preacher who's never invited back. We say, but Obama started it. Okay, first of all, no one researches that to find out how valid it is. And how does that even matter? Children in cages. But they're here illegally. Okay, I'm saying children in cages. It's a separation from one's compassion and empathy. We do this deliberately. And think about it from a spiritual level. We're tasked with love one another. Most religions agree on that. And then when we're put to the test, we just, but. Your soul is on the line, and you're putting a principle of America's immigration law over the doctrine of Christ's message, aren't you? Certainly a bet. It ain't 100%, I'll tell you that for sure. And when we were faced with a global pandemic, a simple thing like wearing a mask became, but. As stores closed and communities were locked down, people said, but. While small business owners struggled to survive and the elderly and minorities struggled to breathe, we heard, but. When schools closed and students suffered and suicide stole their souls, but. When the CDC and every scientist with any credibility all collectively said the same thing, and thousands and tens of thousands and then hundreds of thousands of lives were lost, we heard, but. When faced with the moral dilemma of your actions helping contribute to the fatal demise of another person, we still had people crying that their bars were closed and their rights were being stolen. All the while not wearing the mask that would have prevented the shutdown in the first place. This is a prime example of what this episode is about. the constant wager for our souls. And when put before final judgment, if COVID comes up, how are those anti-maskers who profess to be believers going to respond? Okay, what the hell? While I'm pissing people off, the Second Amendment never said own. It was never written that way. In fact, it was never intended that way. Read James Madison and then come back and we'll discuss it. Read all of James Madison you can find, every sentence, then tell me you believe that he intended what we have today. Regardless, number 2 never said own. Now, what that means can be interpreted many ways. We'll save it for another episode. But what it doesn't mean is something it doesn't say. Right to keep and bear arms, without any specificity to what arms were. No definition. Keep and own are two different things, my friends. I keep my home and my car. I do not own them. The banks own them. I just keep them until I own them, maybe. Like, share, and subscribe. Keep arms is not owning them. It is deliberately keep for a reason. And look, I'm not a traditionalist. This is not a traditionalist conversation. I am a progressive guy. But until we redefine it, we must define it as it was written and intended. The SCOTUS call on number 2 in the 70s was an NRA-sponsored decision, proved me wrong. So even the most American of patriot, you can't use that word anymore, even the most red, white, and blue of us, oh shit, that's problematic too. No matter how much we hold the Constitution dear, when it comes to guns, we compromise that value. We like guns. Guns make us feel safe. We want our guns. You ain't taking our guns, or else. We compromise the actual definition of the actual amendment as it is boldly and plainly written for the sake of being less afraid as a society. In fact, what we know of most of the opposition to gun reform is that they're on the right of the American political spectrum. What do we remember from the Party Crasher series through labor pains? These are the anti-federalists. That's right. The very ideology that wishes to dismantle our federal government. Then what? Do away with the power of our Constitution? To give the states the power to decide things like which marriages are recognized and who gets to walk around like the wild, wild west? Yeah. Cling to the Constitution when it comes to this amendment. These people sell out their very core values, whichever they are, whenever it suits them. It's why they voted for FDR in droves. Well, they say no one is coming for your guns, but I assure you that's only because I'm not running. I'd smelt every damn one of them. Even owning one would be a capital offense. You see, abolish them all. Eliminate the technology. No 3D printer schematics, no blueprints, no dark web how-tos, no guns, zero, not even for criminals. They are, over time, wiped out. Greater good. No more guns. Not even in war. No tanks, no fighter jets, no drones. No technology for the taking of human life. Because here's the thing about guns beyond just a constitutional argument. One human life. Just one human life is more important than any and every firearm, weapon, gun, whatever. One human life is more valuable than my right to feel like less of a coward, which is all anyone with a gun really is. Afraid. One human life is worth more than your right to not study and then misinterpret a clearly written doctrine. Hey, they read the Constitution like they read their Bible. Picking cherries. Makes sense, right? Yet we say we value life, but simply by owning a gun, we're compromising that value too. We're selling out our Constitution by allowing a for-profit organization to rewrite legislation and redefine our Bill of Rights. Then we're selling out our very souls for the sake of promoting a murder industry. because that gun's sole purpose is killing. Debate that to yourself and then come back. It is what it is. I know I sound anti-gun, but I was raised on guns. I was trained on guns. Pretty much all of them. I was raised to respect guns because they kill. I'm not anti-Second Amendment. I understand what it actually means. I've had to study that stuff. I'm not anti-gun in the sense that your rights don't mean anything to me. We probably just disagree about what those rights are and really were intended to be. I am anti-gun in the sense that just one gun existing, even in a museum, could cost a human life, and that is more valuable than that gun itself or any principle behind it. There should be. Still, we compromise the value of life just so we can have guns, don't we? And we can agree or disagree about the actual specifics. I'm saying at the end of it, stripped down to the very basics, we're justifying this compromise on our beliefs. Yeah, but protection. No gun means new rules. Yeah, but you gonna outlaw knives too? No, stop being stupid. Yeah, but it's my right. Okay. Your right, granted by whom? Because to assume it to be a God-given right is placing a whole lot of individual bias on one's deity. Ain't it? Or do we assume that God, who clearly had a hankering for killing people himself, but really didn't like the idea of us killing each other, that God might think it'd be cool for Kyle to tote his machine gun to the rally and say, "Hang on, Mama, I gotta make America white again." I know the difference between a machine gun. Don't worry. Assuming God has endorsed the Constitution, a man-made doctrine, I would just think, as far as betting on one's soul goes, we aren't going to cover the spread on that one. Because either God, the Almighty, ordained the Constitution of the United States during this period of all of existence, which sounds a little jihadi, or man's law overrides God's law. It's often the case. In the game of rock, paper, scissors, the Constitution covers the Ten Commandments. Don't feel bad, evangelicals. Those 10 Commandments still beats an Applebee's menu in most parts of the country. It's a risk. What if you get there at the end and they say, well, I was pretty clear about the no killing thing. And each and every time you were tested, you stood up and said, "It was my right." You see, that's an NRA sticker on the wreckage of the car you just died in. Sorry. I mean, we literally gave you the answers to the test. Yeah. We all make little compromises on our values. For me, as I'll get into a little bit later on, I sort of balance this unpolitical philosophy that all life matters with, in the end, nothing really matters, and I like junk food and fried chicken. It's a constant back and forth I go through. I know what I'm doing to my body when I eat certain foods, like fried chicken. Yet, I still eat fried chicken. I watched my dad compulsively eat himself to death. Every health issue he had was due to his own poor choices. Hello, history repeating. If I truly valued life, I'd eat salads and run 4 miles a day. If I truly valued life, I'd be better and work harder at being healthy, right? But sushi, pizza, and tacos make me smile. It fills that dead space where the soul I sold used to be. Willing to bet I just hit a nerve. We don't have to agree on issues to agree that whichever side we rest on, we are compromising some core foundational values. Human values. To justify how we see things. To make us right. Because nobody wants to be wrong. Because admitting we were wrong means admitting we were taught wrong, which means usually condemning people who maybe aren't around anymore to defend themselves for some of the things they didn't know better than to teach us. In fact, recently I was asked to speak before Capitol Hill on day one of a 10-day, 24/7 filibuster on gun violence. Talk about condemning people who aren't around to defend themselves. I gave testimony about my father, my best friend growing up, the best man at my first wedding, the man who sacrificed so much just so I could acknowledge in official testimony transcripts that he was a narcissist and a sociopath, radicalized in his beliefs, filled with bigotry and toxicity. This was an important speech for me to deliver, and since I've heard from so many very positive messages of how it helped them. My understanding on the subject comes from many, many perspectives. Political and social issues aside, let's turn the camera inward to our own lives. I'm about to say some things that are probably going to come off as judgmental, but please grant me benefit of doubt before you turn me off. A, I need the watch time. 2, just trust me, there is a point. And that point is, we are all the same. We're in this together. We're all selling out our values, selling our souls each and every day. If you have a child, chances are you've had to enlist the help of others to raise that child. It takes a village and all. So whether it's mamaw, daycare, or the public school system, as a parent, we're shuffling off our kids onto someone else all the time. If we aren't, boy, don't we wish we could sometimes. This is where it gets hard to swallow, but I think this point helps us deal with the children in cages and our gun love a little bit better. Aren't we compromising our values by not raising our kids? By abandoning them to stay with strangers? We're causing them trauma. We're causing them separation anxiety. And who knows what else? We're doing some level of damage compared to the social integration and positives that come with enlisting assistance. But we know for sure that our influence is what it is. Do we really know these people we send our kids to and what they're teaching them? The Southern Baptist Convention, for example. I've heard that question asked by this sect of society about many different groups. So let's turn it around on them. So I ask, do we? It's a gamble. Raising a kid is an impossible job, yet so many of us choose to do it, partially, or don't. And in choosing to do that, we also choose to work. We choose to leave our child and go to work. Maybe we have to. Maybe our career is a dream and a goal. But day in and day out, we sacrifice the most important value in our lives as parents to say, here, you deal with it for a while so I can go be me. I've done it. We've all done it. Our economy isn't one where we have a choice, first of all. But each and every day, we wake up and we drink our coffee, even though we are against drugs. And after we chug down that caffeine, we chase that with our antidepressant. We chide the pothead while we can't wait to get home and down half a bottle of wine before dinner. We eat meat, even though we all know what that does to our bodies and the environment. We pump gasoline into our cars, even though we know it's killing our planet and our economy. We stop through the drive-thru. We shove poison down our throats to feel whole. And all of that is before we even get to work. Oh, and we ditch our kid to be somebody else's problem for a while. And so, With this in mind, how hypocritical are we to then stand up for another idea with just as flimsy reasoning and defend that to our dying breath? Sure, that's the hard line you draw in the sand, Julie. Really? 3 fingers pointing right back at you, rubber and glue, glass houses, John 8:7, and everything. First, let me explain that I came from this division we see. What we saw on January 6th, 2021, that toxicity and bastardization of a culture, I grew up in 2 very small, racist southern towns. And I know that sounds like an indictment on its people, but one of the towns is actually known for its racist history and legacy of not being too friendly to folks with melanin. So I know how it makes me sound, because everybody expects us to be humble and praise our heritage. But what do you do when that heritage is pretty embarrassing? I appreciate the places for the beauty in them. They're beautiful, beautiful places. But the people? Some of the people, most of the people, I don't feel like we say it enough. The dark and harsh truths about our lives and the places and people we've known. Look, yes, those places are charming until you talk to someone for too long and realize you might be safe, but you probably shouldn't bring some of your friends. I did radio in these places. I sold cars there. And what I learned about some of these people is that there's a darkness inside some people who are more susceptible to the brainwashing and cultism. And I think I've come to understand a little bit about how people can follow and justify these kinds of toxic attitudes generationally. And I think I understand a little bit better today how to overcome it. I've got racists in my family. They embarrass me, just like yours do you. My multi-level marketing racist cousin won't refer to the former president as anything but Barack Hussein Obama. Just like that. Another cousin, an old dude, and a veteran no less, another racist, marching at the rallies side by side with the KKK and the Proud Boys. Thank you for your service, Trader Joe. And these towns I speak of, they are quaint and lovely little places on the surface. But my experiences there will always lead me to very small, racist southern towns. And I suggest this for the future of anything I might say. If you wanted me to say nice things, maybe you should have worked harder on being nicer. I can pinpoint specific examples that shaped my idea of these places. These places themselves, they're not so sinister. But it's the people we interact with that form our basis on the general atmosphere of a place. And you can dispute them, and we could go back and forth. However, my perception of these places isn't one where ideas thrive and progress blooms and acceptance, because the positive rarely leaves as lasting an impression as the negative. These are the places young people run from to keep from getting sucked into. Maybe a few stay with hopes to change things, or stay because mama and daddy was from there and they stick around. My ventures out of those towns only confirmed my bias. Very small minds, very small ideas, very small perspective, conservative. Because if they weren't conservative, they'd be bigger cities with more progress and opportunity. And that's why you see on election night those maps that they show, blue cities and red everything else. And people who don't know think it's because the entire country is red. But that's a false infographic interpretation, because when it's broken down by population, different visual, it isn't more people. They've just filled in the blank spaces like a children's coloring book. It's just more land. Now I get to sound like a real elitist prick, because I'm going to say the thing that everybody thinks, but it's too nice to say out loud. Why are the cities blue and the counties red? because most of the reasonable people want to get as far the fuck away from the yucks as humanly possible. Sorry, but we don't say that enough, and I expect to catch hell for saying it myself, because it's classist and really racist. I'm racist, y'all. I've always been racist. I was taught racism. And earlier in my life, before I really learned what I was angry about, I think it's fair to say I probably projected a lot of my insecurities toward the easy targets I was trained to hate or make fun of. I'm sorry I was raised that way. I'm sorry I'm still that way. I've just left those towns and those toxic people and ideas, and I'm sorry that at this stage in my life, my own group has become the target of my anger and disappointment. But we don't say it enough. We don't want to be around them. There is a high intellectual cost of being around them. They hold us back and dumb us down, and we feel like we have to slow it down to explain it to them over and over and over and over and over. They demand evidence. We present evidence, then they scoff at it and denounce it, and we're right back to square one again. We like some aspects of the culture, but we don't want some of the people. Why? Because of some of what we're seeing with this ultra MAGA movement, with Republicans right now. Crazy conspiracy theories with nothing behind them but manipulation. And why? How could these earnest people, these down-home people, fall victim to this elementary charlatanism? Because what we are discussing are the ones who have a history of God bless y'all while making the black folk use the restrooms out back. They love thy neighbor, but expel thy trans daughter. We don't and can't trust them. They're as two-faced as their biscuits. The genuineness of this gentle, kind Southern culture is soiled with the true intent at the heart of its people. And if that sounds like an indictment against an entire culture of human beings, it is. Because we haven't done enough to fix it. We haven't stood up enough as a people against our own people to say enough. And why am I so hard on this culture? Because this culture has been one of nurturing and fostering this level of soul-selling ignorance. This nonsensical need to be right. This nonsensical need for persecution and justification of our attitudes. No, I don't speak for everyone. I don't speak for all white people or all Southerners or all anything. I simply speak from my perspective growing up, surrounded by it. In a moment, I'm going to say the N-word. We all need to hear. Get it out in the open. It needs to be said, and we all need to say it, because we haven't said it enough. Apparently, this word that each and every one of us heard growing up, this word that was maybe one of the first words we heard, this word didn't resonate enough then. And so I'm going to say this word right now, the N-word, the word we all need to say. No. No more. When someone says something toxic, when someone says that word, we shout back with our N-word. No, 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 no. Shame them out of their hate swamp. Call them out publicly. And this isn't cancel culture. I've got an episode coming up on that. I'm saying if you aren't going to get in it privately, in your hearts, then let's all get together as a people and make them get it by saying no. Isn't it odd that one word, that racial slur we've all said or sung or thought or mouthed or whispered, isn't it odd that that word itself might be a test? Just like these other little moral dilemmas I've talked about and will talk about in this Selling Our Souls series. Upon final judgment, will your insistence on allowing that word to be said and then the hate and bigotry it fosters to ferment, will that be looked upon as glorifying to whatever God you praise. I've heard my whole life about the Black and Latin communities, that they should fix their own problems. I've heard my people whine and complain about complex socioeconomic and cultural issues they couldn't hope to understand with zero perspective and a 10th grade education. But they speak freely about these minority groups and how they create their own problems by not calling it out when they see it as a culture. Well, I'm calling mine out. I'm a whistleblower. I see them for what they are, both victims of systematic oppression and unhinged sociopaths out to destroy everything around them because they were told to. Both of those things can be true. Now, thankfully, I realize that racism and bigotry is A, learned behavior, and 2, based almost entirely on some level of self-loathing. We hate ourselves, and we hate them because it's easier than hating ourselves. Whomever the them might be, America doesn't hate Tom Brady because he's successful, pretty, unbelievably talented, at the top of his profession, even at retirement. Seriously. 7 Super Bowls? Not even that he's a Trumper. That's not why they hate him. We just found that out a few years ago. No, we hate Tom Brady because we recognize each and every day within us that we don't have what he has. And even if we did, we wouldn't do the work to be that great. Just look at our lives. Look at your own. I've looked at mine. Look, I'm pleased and grateful for my level of success. However, I've also won innumerable Super Bowls on Madden. The hard talks are the ones we need to have right now with ourselves first, then other people. We need to call ourselves out before someone else does. And let me suggest, none of us are immune to cancel culture. If you think you are, drop me an email. We need to talk. We tiptoe around the white discussions. It's white noise, if you will. We don't acknowledge the elephant in the room. We just nod our heads and hope to God nobody has us on film actually being racist. Not just me, all of us. Why the hell is anyone pretending they've never said something shitty? That's the first problem right there. Failure to even admit there is a problem. We'll never get to admitting our own contributions to the problem in the first place. We're afraid to say the things as men because we all know what goes on in our minds. And while we aren't afraid of the other guys hearing us, we sure as hell don't want our daughters to hear. And what the actual hell? Men have been trained and indoctrinated culturally and socially, religiously and politically to exist in this toxic dynamic. Look at our role models. And we don't talk about it because when we do, we have to admit that we've said some pretty skeezy shit. I have. Believe me, I have. And just like you, I have no idea what I would do if someone had a video of me saying something hurtful or vile. Seeing someone filming a stand-up comedy set I did several years ago made me step back and think, what if my kid is with her friends and says, my dad's on YouTube, he's an actor, let's search him out. And then there's my bit comparing my feelings of getting an ultrasound to what a lady might have felt years ago during an evening with me. Ew, but he hilarious. Ew. From race to gender, there's a lot we don't talk about, that we're afraid to talk about, and it doesn't stop there. It's impossible to criticize anything related to government, well, anything anymore, and not be labeled unpatriotic or socialist by people who can't even tell you what it means. And to further explain some of this mindset of paranoid people who believe imaginary forces are out to get them, you cannot learn about Jesus Christ as a child and not learn about persecution. This was the bully story where the bully won. How are you supposed to not grow up with a victim mindset? I know. Hey, Mel. I should only help. Fuels me. I happen to place a lot of personal importance on that story of Jesus Christ. Still, pragmatically speaking, the cornerstone of my spiritual beliefs is rooted in a story of persecution. The guy I'm supposed to emulate sacrificed, yes, but was a victim and lost. No wonder I was bullied as a kid and an adult. We're afraid to have these conversations. We're expected to just suspend disbelief, even in our own selves. Coming up in part 2 of Selling Our Souls, we're going to discuss more of those moral dilemmas and soul-selling stances we insist on surrendering to, thus cementing and solidifying ourselves into certain susceptibility to cultism and doom. I know that's a lot to swallow. There's a lot to say. Suffice to say, these conversations will not be easy. These are some of the hardest things I've had to say publicly. And if you follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or TikTok, you know that's saying something. I feel like we need to have these talks and come clean with the realities of how we were raised, how we were really brought up. Some call it woke. I call it an awakening. I did a song, partially tongue-in-cheek, but also very genuine, about my feelings on wokeism, called Okay to Be Woke. You can find that on my YouTube in my original Music by Sir Talks-A-Lot playlist. This is just the beginning. And once we're through selling our souls, we'll discuss more in depth some of the cultism that keeps us from uniting and boldly going to infinity and beyond. Imagine what this world's peoples could do if we all came together. Maybe we'll get there. But first, we got to save our souls. In part 2, it's peanut butter and jelly, Darth Vader, G.I. Joe, Barry Manilow, and more as we break down one of the biggest hurdles we face as individuals when it comes to accepting new ideas: prejudice, as I deconstruct a culture of cultism. Thanks for joining me. Check out some of my other content on YouTube. I've got videos, I've got TikToks, I've got music. Check it out. My music is in a playlist for you, so follow me on TikTok if you don't already. Like, share, and subscribe to this channel. Help me grow. Do all the things that I need you to do, and if you like this series, consider a donation to my Cash App or subscribe on Patreon. I'm Josh Brandon, and I'm overthinking everything.